so Berkeley was born in Italy, 1685. So he's a 1700s philosopher, right? Kind of around the same time as Descartes, but maybe considered a little bit after. He was heavily influenced by Descartes, and as any of you have been able to do the reading yet, you'll know that he was an opponent of Descartes, quite interestingly, and studied at Trinity College in Dublin. That's very prestigious to this day. And was made, so he taught there, ordained priest afterwards. So there's a lot of, well, anyway, let's just keep rolling here. Berkeley would be considered probably, if you could take this 1700 to maybe 1850, this range. So in Berkeley's two great works of metaphysics, he defends idealism. Okay, we talked about what that is last time. That is the idea that instead of reality being composed of matter, it's actually composed of mind. All right, now I know that's very strange to all of you to think about that, but that's just because you've all been told in your life that there's a thing called, that all this stuff outside of you exists outside of your mind and is called matter. All right, it's really not that strange of a philosophy, as you'll find out, and in some ways you'll find out it's it's stronger than materialism. Materialism is the philosophy that's riddled with problems. So we've got, we talked about mind-body dualism. And that's, the idea that here's your, somewhere here there's your brain is connected to a mind of some sort. And the mind is not physical. That squiggly there, P, not P, just means not physical. But it's connected to a brain, which is physical. Okay. Now Descartes, there's three positions you can take on here. One, that both the physical and non-physical exist. So mind is non-physical, brain is physical, and the two interact. And that interaction point, nobody can explain to this day. Okay. Now, a lot of people in philosophy still hold this position, as you already know. Now, the other position you can take is to eliminate this and just say that everything's physical. So if you have a mind, obviously, but it's actually just a physical phenomenon of your brain system. Okay, that's the position taken basically in the modern world, by academics. Most academics in philosophy and a little bit mathematics. There's some exceptions. Now, the other position you can take is to eliminate this and assert that only non-physical items exist. So it would be the opposite of the philosophy of materialism. And so you might believe you see all this reality outside yourself, but actually the only thing that exists is mind. So either everything that you see exists only in your mind, or if it exists outside of your mind, it is not composed of matter, it's composed of mind. So a brick is composed of mind stuff, whatever mind is made of, non-physical. So you can either go dualism, where you accept both non-physical and physical, or just go with the physical, where you accept only matter as existing, or you can go with immaterialism or idealism, where only the non-physical exists. Okay, Berkeley's going to go with the third, idealism. So, all right, so, yeah, by materialism, well, anyway, that part here. Okay, let me scroll down here a little bit. So what Berkeley wants to do is attack dualism. Okay, Descartes and John Locke, another philosopher from around the same time, held the idea that dualism is correct. Now, both of those two philosophers, as this writing assignment discusses, are representationalists. Now, a representationalist is, you already know what that is. We've explained it in this class. That is the idea that the way you experience reality is by recreating a map of the world outside of you, inside your consciousness. Okay? So you perceive, as we've already discussed, you perceive, here's a tree. The sun shines on the, light on the tree, bounces off the leaves or whatever part of the tree, and some of that light ends up in your eye, hits the back of your eye. The information is processed there and down the optical nerve and in your brain, and poof, you have an experience, because you create, by processing this information inside your consciousness, inside your brain-mind system, according to Descartes, since he's a dualist, you create experience of the world outside of you, but it's constructed. Okay, so there is some constructivism going on here. Now, this is what Berkeley's going to disagree with. He's basically going to say, you don't have any evidence that outside of you this stuff is matter, and that it exists as matter outside of you. All right? The only thing you're aware of is this here. So that's all you know. Okay, so that's all we can assert exists. And hey, if we do that, we can get a really coherent philosophy that avoids all the problems of dualism and materialism. Okay, so that's where he's going here. So Berkeley's attack on matter is to argue that this, the question of what is matter, what is a material thing, cannot be satisfactorily answered by materialists. That is still true to this day. All right? And it's not just some small problem, it's a big problem. Philosophers and some, believe it or not, some physicists take part of this also, even some chemists. They have conferences, they write books, publish papers, trying to define what a material thing is. It's extremely difficult, believe it or not. I mean, this thing right here, drumstick. Trying to define what it is. Basically, every description we have falls into contradiction. Well, I say basically, I'm trying to be gentle here, but that's a pretty safe comment to say our descriptions fall short of coherency. So, we've already discussed that though. So, Berkeley really is going to play off on that in developing his idealist philosophy, which is it's pretty elegant stuff. If you read some of his books, he's a very, very good thinker, very shrewd. So, an answer that captures what a material thing is. Let's go down to the next here. What page am I on here? I'm on, hang on a minute. All right. Page 5. Okay. So, what Berkeley's problem is saying that material objects are mind-independent entities, items. Now, that's an important phrase, which you can use. This is kind of a catchy phrase. You can say mind-dependent or mind-independent. That which is mind-dependent only is known to exist in the mind. That which is mind-independent exists outside of the mind. All right? Now, typically, we think that, like, take this right here, the drumstick, is, most of you, if I said to you at the beginning of the semester, is this mind-dependent or independent? You'd be saying, well, obviously, it's independent. It exists outside of my mind. But then, now you've had some philosophy, and you know that actually the experiences occur in your consciousness. So some of you may say, well, I'm not sure. It feels like it's outside of me. It feels like it's mind independent. If I close my eyes and don't think about it, it'll still exist, in other words. It's part of the material world outside of me. But some of you might say, I'm not so sure, because I only know of it in my consciousness. I only know of it as a mental entity, a mental experience. Well, Berkeley will say, well, no need to be not sure. That's all we know, are mind-independent entities. So therefore, everything in our experience is mind-dependent. All right. All we know is mind-dependent entities. Everything in our experience is such, so that's therefore all we can claim to exist. All right. So makes a lot of sense, really. And a mind-independent thing is something whose existence is not dependent on thinking things, and thus would exist whether or not any thinking minds existed. So a mind-independent entity, if all of a sudden all minds vanished from existence, the drumstick would still exist, would be the position of a person who holds that there are mind-independent entities. If you don't agree that they're mind-independent entities, that all entities depend on the mind's existence, or a mind's existence, if all minds cease to exist, there is no drumstick. Now, which do you think that modern physicists, modern quantum scientists holds? Anybody have a guess? Anybody daring at, 4 in the morning or whatever early time it is right now? They kind of go both ways. It just depends. If you talk to some quantum physicists, they will say things to the effect that, well, the drumstick actually is just particle energy. And the surface and solidity and color and so forth, those are constructed in consciousness. So really the drumstick as you know it is mind dependent. That's very common. Probably most quantum physicists you talk to, you can stop by the physics department after class and ask them if you'd like. They probably would say, most of them would probably say something just like that. And they'll probably even maybe go further and say, well, in the particle energy is very different than what you perceive. Two are almost opposites, but as we've already discussed. Some physicists will hold more of a mind-independent view, but the mind dependency thesis is definitely alive and well in at least one area of science, that's quantum physics. Now, would they go around calling themselves idealists and say everything is mind? Some do, but that's obviously very rare. Most physicists will call themselves materialists, even though their quantum philosophy involves describing matter, particles, in terms that sure don't sound very material-like. So everybody's got mind dependent, independent. It's real simple. Mind independent means things can exist if there are no minds. Mind dependency, things only can exist if there are minds. Okay? Berkeley's going to hold mind dependent. People like Descartes, Locke, they will hold, according to mind-body dualism, there are physical things outside of our consciousness. Okay, so, all right, so Descartes had a nice little saying, I think therefore I am. Bishop Berkeley does as well, SES Percipi. To be is to be perceived. If something is not perceived, it doesn't exist. That's what, if you hold that all entities are mind dependent, that's what you believe. Okay? If you go up to any philosopher and say SES Percipi, they're going to say, oh yeah. They're going to know exactly what you mean. So, anyway. Okay, so Berkeley charges that materialism promotes skepticism and atheism. Skepticism because materialism implies that our senses mislead us to the nature of material things. Okay, yeah, our senses, well said, our senses, there's a paradox kind of here. If you look at the drumstick, it feels like it's outside of you. At least, if you're in a religious state of consciousness, such as Christian ecstasy or Buddhist nirvana or something like that, you may not feel that way anymore. It's really the ordinary state of consciousness, what sometimes is called the ego, where you feel that I'm here, it's there, the two of us are separate, it's outside of my consciousness. You feel that. It's an innate, spontaneous feeling that exists when you look at something material outside, that is believed to be outside of your consciousness. Now, if you close your eyes and think about the drumstick, and put a picture of it in your mind, for some reason then at that moment, it'll feel like it's inside your conscious. It'll feel like a piece of imagination, a piece of your conscious content. So what Berkeley wants to say is that these are illusions. It's all just inner content. It's all just mind content. One just involves a feeling of being outside in the world, and the other inside as a piece of imagination in your consciousness. But he says those are just all misleading you. It's everything is inner. Okay? And strictly speaking, he's right. Now notice the representationalist, this is an important point, which we'll cover again later, but let me just mention it right now. The representationalist and the idealist agree on one thing. Everything experienced is mind content. But the representationalist will hold that, well, those mind contents are caused by material objects outside of us. Okay? In other words, the tree, to put this in simpler terms, the tree, so we have a mental experience, a picture in our mind of the tree. Okay? And it's you're looking at your own piece of your mind. Both the idealist and the representationalist will say that. The idealist will say, well, that's the end of the story. It's just mind stuff. But the representationalist will say, no, the reason it's there is because it was evoked to exist, caused to exist by a material entity outside of your mind, a mind-independent entity. That's the difference between representationalism and idealism. Everybody got that? That's an important distinction. Anybody not get that? Because I'd be more than happy to say the same thing, the exact same words again. Just kidding, bad joke. I would say it in different words. All right, everybody's cool? Okay. Yeah, so he thinks materialism promotes atheism, skepticism, because our senses mislead us as to the nature of material things, which moreover need not exist. And atheism, we need not exist because, well, if we only know mind-dependent inner mental entities, how do we know they're really caused by physical objects outside of our mind? You don't. That's the whole problem with mind-body dualism and, well, representationalism. We do not know a way to prove that this picture screen movie theater of your mind that you're existing through at every moment is actually about real things being represented. It's a representation of the world outside you. It's extremely difficult to prove that, if even anybody has yet. Okay, so, but Berkeley says that materialism promotes atheism also because the material world can be expected to run without the assistance of God. Now that's exactly where modern science is right now, in general. There's exceptions, but the average scientist, you go up to your average chemistry professor, biology professor, whatever, and say, does evolution or Big Bang or whatever the latest fads are in science, do these need to be do we need a God for these to happen? And they're going to say, no, the whole point of science is to show that no God is needed. Okay, so Berkeley is quite correct here that materialism, the whole point of it, the universe is, if there is a God, it is he, she, it created a universe to definitely look like it can run on its own. I think there's a verse in the Bible that says that God likes to hide himself. I think it's in the Old Testament, I can't remember where. It's in one of those Kings books about the Old Testament kings. So that's interesting. So the Bible, I think, Berkeley should be thinking that his Bible there kind of agrees with this. So these are interesting points, but interesting because they really lead up to modern day thinking, where academia is today, and which is atheism and materialism. Okay, no God is needed because the cosmos, everything can just happen on its own. The whole point of evolution is, or Big Bang, or all these theories, is to try to explain where everything came from without the existence of a supernatural creator. Now, okay, let's just be honest. We know that they haven't succeeded in that task yet, okay? Usually when you go into college class, they want to just tell you that, yep, that's where we are. And we're all quite sure of it. But nobody knows where the Big Bang singularity came from. Nobody's seen a zebra change into a horse for evolution and all this kind of stuff. So maybe the best way to put it is to say this is the dream of modern science, to explain material reality perfectly with all the causal interactions in place without the need of a creator. Okay, so it is indeed the opinion. Here's a quote from Berkeley. Let's move on here. Any questions? Okay. It is indeed an opinion strangely prevailing amongst men, this is Berkeley, that houses, mountains, rivers, and in a word, all sensible objects have an existence, natural or real, distinct from their being perceived by the understanding. What he's saying here is what we've already said. We have this feeling that things outside of us are distinct from mind. Your consciousness just involves that feeling. Okay, when you look at the drumstick or tree or whatever. Okay, which we've already talked about. So let me plow on here. Okay, but with great assurance and acquiescence, soever the principle may be entertained in the world, yet whoever shall find in his heart to call in question may, if I mistake not, perceive it to involve a manifest contradiction. So he thinks this involves contradiction. For what are the aforementioned objects but things we perceive by sense? So he's saying, again, what we've already just discussed. He's saying you can perceive anything you want, trees and stars or your own thoughts, whatever. Everything is, it's going to be very, 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 very difficult for you to explain what you're perceiving is not part of your own mind. You're just looking at your own thoughts. It's what your life is. Going from moment to moment to moment, watching your own conscious content. Okay? Now, believe it or not, well, maybe it's not that surprising to you, but that view is pretty much still mainstream today. I mean, if you go to your biology professor and say, "Hi, Professor Smith, am I just perceiving my own thoughts, my own conscious content every moment of my life, from moment to moment to moment?" And wait for their answer. They're going to be like, "What? What are you talking about?" So, but if you broke it down for them and discussed representationalism, your psychology professor, your biology professor, most of them are going to probably say something like, "Yep, that's the representationalist philosophy is more or less where we're at. There's variations of it. And yeah, if I think about it, we are just, from moment to moment, trapped in our consciousnesses." Okay? This is why something like telepathy should be studied. Well, it is studied a little bit. Everybody knows what telepathy is, reading each other's minds. Like, say right now we're all in a lecture here and you're there and I'm here, but there's, outside of our awareness, there's mental interaction maybe. Or maybe where we feel each other's feelings, you can hear each other's thoughts, or you can sense each other's selves or something. Maybe all of you are doing that with all of each other right now. All right? Believe it or not, this used to be studied pretty heavily in academia in the 1800s and early 1900s. And go look up, I forgot the name of it. Hang on a second. I didn't know I'd be talking about this. Let me just see if I can really quickly look something up here. Oh yeah, there we go. I think this is it. Yes. Okay, look up Ganzfeld. Ganzfeld. It's an experience. There's a number of experiments that have been done to try in. Okay, let me get to that in just a second. So the point. Why do we want to know about telepathy? Well, if it was really true that we're all trapped in each other's consciousness, we may want to know if something like telepathy exists, where we can all interact with each other, where our conscious content involves interacting with other consciousnesses. Okay? That could maybe give us some hope that if it's important to us that we're not just trapped inside our consciousnesses and we are all actually interacting at a very soulful level, to put it casually. So the Ganzfeld experiments, these basically kind of go as follows. You don't need to know this for your quiz. Let me just explain it very quickly and we can move on. These are a set of experiments done around the world. Even Stanford University had for a long time. I think they may still be doing it at Princeton. There's a group at Princeton called the PAIR group. like the fruit pear. Princeton Engineering and Emily's research group. And they do experiments basically of this type where you put somebody in a sensory deprivation tank, okay? So they don't have any, they're in some kind of tank, some kind of enclosure where they can't hear anything outside of it. They're completely shut off from the world, sensory deprivation, okay? And then you put somebody next to the tank outside of it watching TV. This is just one way it was done. And you have the person inside inside the tank, look at their mind. Say, try to look at your thoughts and or whatever, just write down whatever you want. Just start writing. Don't think about what you're doing. Just do it with no will. Just like stream of consciousness, auto writing. Okay? Or draw pictures, do whatever you want. And then tell the person outside, just watch TV. And little do they know, the person that watching TV has a specifically, carefully set up broadcast they're watching, which, for example, may have a very dominant, unusually dominant set of yellow items. There's a school bus. Now there's a big yellow bulldozer. My son would like that. Blah, blah, blah. Big yellow sun, anything. So they don't know, but there's just a lot of yellow. Maybe they didn't think of it, maybe they did. Then you get, you have them do that for 15 minutes, then you take the person out of the tank and look what they wrote. And it's hard to figure this out, but you have to, did somehow the theme of their writing involve yellow objects, yellow themes, something yellow? Often the emotion, anger, is associated with the color yellow. I guess there's experiments you can do. If you have a yellow room and put kids in it, they'll act one way. If you have a blue room and put same kids in it, they'll act calmer. Apparently that's been done. And they, when they have the yellow room, they're all pulling each other's hair and everything. So don't paint your kid's room yellow, okay? If that's true, that experiment. So anyway, apparently there is a above chance level, according to people that interpret this data, that the person in the tank, their writing content involved a yellow theme. So all you need to have, you don't need to have it blast out of the writing saying yellow, yellow, yellow. It just needs to be interpreted as involving yellow at a more than chance level. If that was the case, then there's telepathic interaction going on between the two people. Okay. Now this experiment's been done all over the world many, many times, and ubiquitously and overwhelmingly, people report that sure, there's a telepathic interaction that's detected among people. Now, all of you know that kind of this goes on. Anybody you've had kids, especially like a mom, there's whole books written on mother-child telepathy. Where I remember there's one time when I had my first child born, my daughter. There was this one time she was playing on she was maybe 1.5. She's playing on this little bridge. This is when I lived in Kalamazoo. And all of a sudden she fell, but about 10 seconds before it, I was like, something's gonna happen. Like I was thinking, like I was really watching her. In a way not standard for the way a protective parent usually is, hovering over the kid. But I had a feeling something's gonna happen. So sure enough, then she's like, whoa, and I had to catch her. And that prompted me, it was such a vivid experience, it prompted me to do some research into this kind of stuff. But and I've since noticed lots of experiences like that in my own mind and others. My wife also has reported a bunch. There's one experience called the catalytic exteriorization phenomenon. Some of you maybe reported this, like right before you trip on the stairs or something, you have maybe a half second or a quarter second before you're like, something's gonna happen. Something right now, I'm gonna fall, or something's gonna happen. All of a sudden, whoa, and you fall. Or trip or whatever. I remember when same child my wife was pregnant with once, she was walking on the stairs and she tripped. She's like, man, right before I knew I was gonna trip. And my leg just kept going. I didn't stop myself or something, there wasn't enough time, but I just knew a split second before I was going to. So the point is, if you watch your mind really, really carefully, the mind does weird things. Now your psychology professor will tell you, oh, it's all just coincidence, and your mind does so many things that there's gonna be a couple times where it seems like it knows something just before it happens, and it's just all your mind playing tricks on you. Well, that's a theory. This would all have to be experimented to determine exactly what's going on. But probably most of you, if you watched your mind carefully, you would notice some funny things going on. Where it appeared that the mind knows more than the materialist perspective would allow. So anyway, so where was I forgot where it even was. Okay, so let me see where I left off. Let's scroll up to that. Yeah, so the materialist perspective involves a contradiction, according to Berkeley, where, let me just reread this whole part. So the feeling that entities exist outside of us involves a contradiction, according to Berkeley, for what are the aforementioned objects, but things perceived by sense, and what do we perceive besides our own ideas and sensations? Yeah, so obvious point, and it is not plainly repugnant for any, and is it not plainly repugnant for any of these or any combination of them should exist unperceived? Yeah, so he thinks writing and philosophy often kind of had some of these emotional words, stuff in it in the past. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist anymore among philosophers, but Berkeley's just taking an obvious point. There's nothing really that controversial here. He has a great point. Your author, Lisa Downing, who wrote this entry in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, she also says, Berkeley's got evidence lining up for him here. To say that your mental experience is just in your mind, that what you experience is just your own mind your whole life, is pretty safe comment in philosophy and really in science too. That's what Berkeley does here. We perceive objects. Okay, can you get any simpler than that? No. That is, I perceive people and desks and trees and stuff right now. I'm not going to deny that. It's absolute fact. Okay? But also here, Berkeley uses the representationalist philosophy here to say we actually only perceive our own mental content. Not as safe as this one, but pretty safe. Not bad. Very difficult to get around this. Okay? Therefore, this is this. Ordinary objects are ideas. So he's saying A is true, B is true, A and B are true. Okay, that's the way he's real simple. That's the way to really get your point. If you want to win an argument, win a debate, this is how you do it. Okay? And the most important point is this word therefore. That's called an inference. If you ever heard somebody say, I'm inferring such and such. What they're saying is these data points and this conclusion they have a connection between them called the inference. Okay? And what you see is when you read this point, this just naturally flows. Oh yeah, that comes right out of it. These directly infer this. Okay, that's the way you do a good argument. So here's Berkeley's position. We perceive material objects. We perceive only our intermental content, our ideas. So therefore, those material objects are ideas. That tree, right there, whatever one you want to pick, this chalkboard, this drumstick, are mind stuff. Okay, and I tell you here, Berkeley's got the edge, in not just my opinion, many philosophers would say this is difficult to get around an argument like this. This is strong philosophy. Okay? Now, do those same philosophers call themselves idealists? Not always. Most philosophers will say, well, this is very strong reasoning, but there's got to be a way around it. Someday we'll discover a third data point here, which will change the conclusion to say objects seem to be ideas, but are really mind-independent matter or something, but not today. But that's an important point that I just brought up. Notice that's a really important point. What did I just do? Not me. In describing, I said philosophers are aware of this. There's others that have presented this argument in a more sophisticated form after Berkeley. Okay? And it leads to the idealist conclusion. What is this? Is mind. All this around you is just mind. There is no matter. It's all mind. Okay? Whether it's inside of you or really exists outside of you, I don't know. But probably what Berkeley's going to say, no, it's just your mental content. It's like you're living in a dream. a dream that you're awake in. That's your life. Okay? And man, this argument makes it very convincing that he's right. Now, philosophers know this, but they often will say, well, this is great, but I think it's wrong. Okay. Did you see the move that was just made there? The move is to deny evidence. Okay? Berkeley's going with the evidence here. But many contemporary philosophers will say, this just has to be wrong. Because I feel like objects outside of me, like this table, exist. Well, who cares how you feel? I also feel that remember we had the stick in the glass, and light refraction made the stick look bent. Well, anyway, so I mean, our senses deceive us. Our perceptions of the world are incredibly fallible. There's sense error all over the place. Colors may not even exist. Solid matter, even if you're a materialist, nobody really even has a definition of it yet. It may not even exist. It may be an illusion. This may be an energy pattern. Our hand may be an energy pattern. The chalkboard may be an energy pattern. And when the two come near each other, they repel. And that could be what we call solidity, but there's really no solidity. So the point. Okay, so what am I getting at here? There's two ways you can go about your life. One, follow good, clear evidence and form your ideas about reality that way. Almost nobody's doing that. Okay? And the other way you can live is just make up whatever ideas you want to be true from moment to moment and live by those. Now that's what most people are doing, and that's just how reality works. Okay, I don't think anything's going to change that. In 1,000 years, I don't think people are going to be in the brave new world of 1,000 years. People are going to be that much smarter that they're not going to do that anymore. People have agendas and biases, and they make up reality as they want. If you're a weird philosopher like myself and you try to be logical, what's that going to do for you? It's going to make you lose all your friends, right? Philosophy humor. And you think I'm kidding. I have lost friends. So anyways, not that that's a problem. So Berkeley's got a good argument here. If you want to be logical, you may want to entertain that this could be true. What does this sound like? This sounds like simulation theory. Remember we studied simulation theory? And it just keeps popping up over and over. The idea that reality is actually non-physical and some sort of a mental computer program, game that you participate in or something. You know, we saw that in Plato, seen that it actually exists in the medieval philosophers in places, some of Augustine's writing, and here we find it probably more pronounced than anywhere else semester, right in Berkeley's work. Okay? Okay, so it's a good argument, hard to deny. Okay? Lisa Downing is going to talk about premise 2 here, and what she's going to say essentially and what follows is, okay, this is making use of representationalism. What if representationalism is wrong, then this argument doesn't work anymore. So if you don't want this argument to work, you want to attack premise 2. Now, that's going to be an uphill battle because, well, while we don't know for a fact that representationalism is the correct way to view a materialist reality where there is a reality existing outside of your mind and you perceive it, it's very hard to come up with better theories than representationalism for how that happens. One theory is called direct realism, and that's the idea that you perceive reality exactly as it is, and you're not creating maps, you're really perceiving it. Now, nobody can explain this to my knowledge in any detail, so that's why most people don't even teach on it much. Sometimes it's called naive realism. So, yeah, some of my notes, we can just skip over that. So the point here is that Berkeley is combating the representationalists, okay? And I personally think philosophers make too big of a deal out of Berkeley's use depending on representationalism for that argument. Because, like I said, it's still widely accepted. Because nobody can come up with a better way to explain mind-independent reality, our experience of it. All right? So Berkeley devotes the succeeding sections of the principles, his book, The Principles, to undermining representationalist response to that argument. And in fact, he poses the question, what allows an idea to represent a material object? He's basically going to say, okay, let's explore this. How can that tree cause this picture thought in here of that tree? And wow, Berkeley's going to say it's a big uphill battle to try to explain how this can happen. Okay, does anybody have any questions at this point? Everybody's crystal clear, understands everything perfectly. Great. So here's Berkeley. But you say through ideas themselves, though the ideas themselves do not exist without the mind, yet there may be things like them whereof they are copies and resemblances. Okay, it's just talking about representations in your mind. Which things exist without the mind in an unthinking substance? I answer, an idea can be like nothing but an idea. Okay, an idea is not solid matter out there, it's mental stuff. Okay, which he wants to say is non-physical. So what is he saying here? Let me try to paraphrase this better. He's trying to say, look, my thought and that brick over there seem just different. My thought is like a digital picture. It has emotion in it. It has this verbal stuff called thought in it. If you look at your mind, you'll see all this going on all the time. It sure doesn't look like that brick over there, which just is a brick. All right? What do the two have to do with each other? That's ultimately where he's going here. An idea can be nothing like nothing but an idea. A color or figure can be like nothing but another color. All right? So assumption, our ideas are copies or representations of the world. Okay, this is the representationalist makes this assumption. The representationalist has to admit their philosophy involves the assumption that our mind is a copy of the world. It can show us a copy of the world. In other words, the maps created in our mind do accurately tell us what the world's like, represent the world. Ouch, you know? Well, not for Berkeley, but for if you're a mind-body dualist or a materialist, that's a big ouch right there. Okay, so Berkeley objects to representationalism. An idea cannot resemble a non-idea. If there's just mind stuff that you're aware of, it can't be created by stuff that is not mind stuff, like that brick over there, or the tree. Because the two, there's no way that, nobody's explained it yet. Nobody's shown how it can happen. It appears to involve contradiction, which means it's impossible, it can't happen. And Berkeley really is going to play off this. Okay? Mind and world can't interact where one can give rise to the other, where the world can give rise to mind. Okay, the mind can compare nothing but its own ideas, which by hypothesis are only things immediately perceivable. The representationalist cannot assert a likeness between an idea and a non-ideal mind-independent material object there. That's just saying the exact same thing I just said in Lisa Downing's phraseology. Berkeley is merely showing that the representationalist assumes there are mind-independent objects. Ouch. So, if some of you are convinced by this but don't like it, is it that bad? I mean, this is kind of a spiritual hypothesis, right? Everything's non-physical. We're going in the direction of the spiritual, not the atheistic matter. Remember Berkeley saying that materialism leads to atheism? So, it could be worse, right? And how do we know? Maybe we do in this computer simulated mind reality. Maybe we do interact. How do you know we don't? Maybe we interact in ways much more profoundly and deeply than we even realize. Maybe some of you who have a spiritual life, whatever religion or whatever you're involved in, have gotten glimpses of that, where your intimacy, relations with other people increases greatly to where the two of you are greater than the sum of the parts. Whereas if there's something spiritual going on, something larger, which materialism can't explain. So I wouldn't get too depressed if you think this is right. A lot of people are convinced by this. There's a lot of idealists in modern philosophy. So, okay, sorry, I gotta let you go. Have a quiz on Monday.